God, it's bright enough out tonight. You'd think we could see the bottom.
Really? 'Cause I can see the bottom just fine. The series is circulated around a search team working under Winter. Winter was established by the United Nations to detect and vanquish any and all supernatural and strange phenomena associated with monsters and aliens that threaten the planet. Winter is helmed by a group of 5 agents. Captain Russell Edlund, played by Harrison Page, Chief Commander of Operations; Rick Sanders, played by Roy Fitzgerald, the team marksman and one of the pilots; Julie Young, played by Robyn Bliley, another pilot and frequently flies with Rick Sanders; Teresa Beck, played by Sandra Guibord, the team scientist, and is responsible for information management operations; and finally, Kenichi Kai, played by Kane Kazugi, Winter's second-in-command, rear support, and intelligence collector, and a mutant human who later joins with a new team, partnered with a Keanu Reeves look-alike, to battle other strange creatures across the globe, such as a giant shrimp or lobster, aliens from Planet X, and eventually has to aid Godzilla in saving the planet from certain wrong franchise. But he is the one who merges himself with the life of Ultraman powered, making him somewhat like a mutant human working for an organization that battles varieties of giant monsters and aliens a little more than a decade before Kane Kazugi played that other mutant human who worked for an organization that battles giant monsters and aliens.
Sorry, I'm a vegetarian.
When the situation becomes too dire for Winter's efforts to control, Kenichi Kai uses the Beta Capsule to change into Ultraman powered, and an epic showdown ensues. Well, epic in the form of what looks more like 2 fat kids pushing and shoving each other because one of them stole the other's cookie in the school cafeteria. Makes for exciting TV, don't it? The characters aren't bad, really. They're enough to move the plot along, but they don't offer much to stand out from the heroes from other Ultra shows. The Yuma team members weren't always so distinct or able to stand out either, but they at least bore certain qualities that made them entertaining to watch. The Winter team just seems like a bunch of generic, almost one-dimensional characters that don't necessarily offer much of anything to really make them highly memorable or unique. Captain Edlund is your typical no-nonsense captain, but that's really it to his character. Unless you want to include that he seems to value orders from his higher-ups at the expense of his team's objections, we'll all see how crucial it is to solve the mystery at hand.
Very well. Beck, Young, Kai, you are in violation of a direct order from a superior officer, and I hereby place you under suspension until further notice.
What?
Turn in your ID badges before you leave the building.
So that takes away some of his likability. Beck is the science wizard, but that's about all she offers to the table. Compare her to E-Day from the original Ultraman, or Charles Morgan from Ultraman Great, who were both written as the science geek and the plucky comic relief for their respective series. And occasionally, they offered surprising levels of depth to their performance when placed in situations that made them question their values as a team member, or even as a human being. They were also the weapons manufacturer, often creating weapons or chemicals that were needed to kill a monster, as well as other devices to protect them from a monster's attack. Beck, on the other hand, never creates a weapon or a chemical, and only gives insight on a monster's vulnerabilities, and the functions of its biology. Sanders is the team's version of Arashi, the guy always so eager to charge headfirst into battle, always eager to shoot something until it's very, very dead, despite the little factoid that his marksman skills range from being dead on to what looks like he's only a week into Stormtrooper Academy.
Well, that didn't work.
He's also the comic relief of the show, and when I say that, I'm only being generous, because his attempts at humor are, as I already said of the show's jokes, just derivative pop culture puns that require very little thought or effort.
The bigger they are, the harder they fall.
Talk about a heavyweight fight. Woohoo! Say cheese. Come on, baby, open up and say ah. Woo! Now that's what I call shooting.
Hey, but he loves food. He and Charles would probably get along very well.
Well, if I knew the monster was coming, I'd have baked it a cake.
It eats uranium, Sanders.
I know, but there's this recipe I've been dying to try.
Sanders' reference to that recipe is the only time he ever brings up anything about food, so even that isn't a notable characteristic of his personality. In the original Ultraman, there were 2 episodes where Arashi got scolded by Captain Muramatsu for shooting at a monster after he'd been given a direct order not to do so. Well, he was disciplined after the first time he disobeyed an order, while the second time he barely gets a slap on the wrist. But he was still reprimanded for his action the first time. You know what happened to Sanders when he fired upon a monster, when he was strictly told not to do so? Captain Edlund just checks on him to make sure he's okay.
You're joking. I can't believe I'm hearing this.
And then Sanders disobeys the captain's orders again in a later episode, and just like Arashi's repeated instance of defiance, he only gets a slap on the wrist, nothing more.
I gave you a direct order, Sanders.
Transmission scattered, Captain. Did not copy. Repeat transmission.
Young is a pilot, but so is Sanders, who she often accompanies on her missions, so there really isn't much to distinguish her, except that she's the sister-in-law of Jamra. Finally, we have Kai, who's second in command, but I wasn't even aware of that until now, because he barely practices any authority in the show at all. He accompanies his crew as an assistant on their various missions, offering insight every here and there, but that's about it. He doesn't actually do a whole lot that makes him look like a valuable member of the team with his own expertise. Remember how Jack Shindo used his enhanced abilities to communicate with other aliens, or ascertain basic knowledge on a life form mutated by Gudis? We got absolutely none of that in this series. The only thing you'll really notice about Kai is that he's the human host of Ultraman Powered. And yet, he barely puts that feat to good use sometimes. In one episode, he almost changes into Ultraman to fight Gibora, but is then urged to save a guy who's in the monster's path. He could have just changed right then when Young left, but I guess he decided it was more fun to laugh in the face of danger. Like jumping on a barrel and giving himself a concussion, keeping him out of the action while Gibora is prepping to decimate a nuclear reactor.
Good job. Good job. Really good job.
I guess it's time to finally go into the titular hero himself, Ultraman Powered. First off, fun fact, Ultraman was voiced by Sho Kazugi, who's the real-life father of Kenichi Kai's actor, Kane Kazugi. The show created an Ultra 7 Ultraman Zero storyline before Zero was even a thing. And not only that, the stuntman inside the powered suit is Scott Rogers, who would later go on to lead a very successful career as a professional stuntman and stunt coordinator for a number of major big-budget movies, including True Lies, Spider-Man 2, Crank, and John Wick 3, to name but only a few.
He's rich. He is rich!
Anyway, Powered is... well, let's just say he's an Ultraman that was severely let down in this series, just like everyone else was, on and off screen. The obvious point of reference is, of course, his lackluster fights with the opposing monsters. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but that one con in his design probably makes him the most forgettable character in the show, given that he doesn't do very much to leave much of an impact on the viewer through his on-screen performance. A stark contrast to Ultraman Great. While Towards the Future displayed a symbiotic relationship between Ultraman Great and Jack Shindo, treating the duo as two separate entities that not only relied on the other for survival, but they could also telepathically converse with each other, not only showcasing them as individual characters, but also giving Great the opportunity to do more than just be the action icon of the show. He could be the moral compass of Jack when he needed Ultraman's counsel. Compare that to Powered, who only shares a chat with Kenichi Kai in the first and last episodes, completely distancing from the student-mentor bond shared in the last series, which was quite honestly the most innovative quality about that series and actually made it rather noteworthy among the many other Ultra shows that came out before it. As if that weren't insulting enough, Powered's voice is a far stretch from the voice of Great. Remember how Great's voice sounded so majestic and calm? His tone made him sound like he were some form of deity, or a mighty angel sent from God to protect mankind.
We've both got a job to do, Jack.
Yeah, but you were bred for it.
My people didn't have a choice. It was fight the Kunis or say goodbye to the universe.
I want to fight, but I want to be human.
Well, you are most of the time.
You know what they did to Powered's voice?
Who are you?
I am from a system you know as M78. I belong to an organization that maintains peace throughout the galaxy.
Seriously? That's our hero? They made him sound like a computer program you commonly see on those old sci-fi shows from the 80s and 90s. When they can't even get the hero's voice to sound cool, you know the problems on set were way worse than you already suspect. When comparing Powered and Great, there's at least one positive note I can grant. While Great could fire finger lasers that seemed rather anticlimactic for an Ultra hero, Powered can fire the Spacium Ray just like the original Ultraman. Just like any other Ultraman, he has a color timer that indicates his power level. What sets him apart from the other Ultra heroes is that his solar energy is indicated not just through his color timer, but also through his eyes, which will change from blue when he's full on power, and then revert to red when his energy is dwindling. Thank goodness the effects crew decided to install that feature, because I can barely tell if the light is blinking or not, because of the bright lighting that keeps it obscure most of the time. Unless the light on his chest was broken while filming. Collectively, other than his ability to fly, Ultraman Powered has maybe 3 powers that he uses in the show: the Spacium Ray, and an energy ball that I would guess causes far less damage than his ray, and power to magically put out fires by thrusting his wrists, which to me came off as very lazy in the Pestar episode. In Oil SOS, after killing Pestar, Ultraman's new goal was to put out the flames that were consuming the oil refinery from the monster's attack. He accomplished this by spraying a stream of water from his fingers. It took him maybe 2 minutes of the episode's runtime to fully extinguish the fires. Jump ahead 27 years, and we see Powered do it simply by doing a sudden gesture with his fists. This ability may seem cool and almost godlike, but from a critical eye, it comes off more as cheap and tedious, because it removes any and all tension that was found in the scene beforehand. Because of his 3-minute supply of power, the original Ultraman had to work swiftly to save the refinery, which ultimately made his success at the end so much more relieving and satisfying. Powered's way of problem-solving in the remake episode feels the exact opposite, as it leaves us feeling no suspense or dread from wondering if the hero will be able to save the area from the hellfire in time, because he can apparently just make a danger disappear in the blink of an eye. And if we've learned anything from Captain Marvel, it's that it is a disastrous idea to make your hero too overpowering. Your audience will never be able to relate to the character, nor fear for their safety at all.
The creature didn't appear until nightfall, and it left immediately at dawn. It's from underground, so it hates the light. Maybe we can use the light to drive it away.
Actually, I think my laser fire drove it away.
Well, now you see, if you get up, I'm just gonna have to knock you down again.